This lecture is titled The Limits of the Law. It's about the activist tool, the open letter. And what I'm going to do is compare the open letter to the petition, which we talked about last time, and point out the shortcomings of the petition as a tool for change. It is more broadly about the shortcomings of legal change. As social activists, we often think that legal change is the ultimate goal. But in a lot of cases, even when laws do change, it doesn't change our situations on the ground. And the best example that I can come up with for that of legislative changes that have benefited women that have not always done what we wanted to, is the Equal Pay Act of 1963. This law is over 50 years old and it prohibits wage discrimination against women. Now we know, according to the most recent figures, that women are still making 81 cents. That's a slight improvement, actually. 81 cents on the dollar for in comparison to men. That number has fluctuated around the high 70s, low 80s for the past, since the 1980s, and really has not gone anywhere. So even though we have this law on the books, we still face quite a bit of wage discrimination. And I also wanted to mention that that figure doesn't tell the whole story, okay? Because for Black women, compared to white men, the statistic is much lower. And for Latinas, in fact, it's 57 cents on the dollar 57 cents to every dollar that a white man earns. So wage discrimination is still a huge problem, even though we have legislated it away. Now, the other piece of change is, of course, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and that prohibited discrimination against women more broadly. It was a very broad law that originally addressed racial discrimination in employment, education, and government services. Fun fact, conservatives actually added sex to the list of things that it would cover in addition to race and religion. And they did that because they were hoping that it would force the Civil Rights Act to fail. But that didn't work. And the Civil Rights Act ended up passing. And then all of a sudden you have a law that, two laws actually, that are for the benefit of women really before the second wave of the feminist movement even starts. We get these legal changes first, just really for kind of accidental. In the case of the Civil Rights Act, we were included by fluke. We got very lucky, okay? But of course, we don't have full equality under the law still. And I'm conflicted about what that means. Now, the last piece of legislation that would give women full equality under the law is the Equal Rights Amendment. The Equal Rights Amendment would be an amendment to the Constitution that would require no gender discrimination in any cases. And so it would strengthen the provisions of the Civil Rights Act that protect women by actually enshrining equal rights in the Constitution. Now, in 1973, it passed through Congress, but the Equal Rights Amendment has still not been ratified by enough states to actually become law. And so on the one hand, I think it's very disturbing that, and most people probably think that women do have equal rights under the Constitution. I think it's very disturbing that we don't have these rights legally, but I also do wonder if the ERA would really do everything that we hope that it will do if we did get equal rights under the Constitution. We know from past experience that just because you make something law doesn't make it so. And so even after a law passes, we have a substantial amount of work to do on our culture. And even in the field of wages, which seems like something that you could legislate, we really need to change attitudes and opinions about what men's work is worth and what women's work is worth. Those seem to be more powerful than our legislative protections in a lot of ways. So going back to this distinction between an open letter and a petition, A petition was, we remember, a direct appeal to someone in power. Um, and it gains impact by the number of signatures. So you're writing directly to someone with the power to change, and you're hoping that by collecting enough signatures and demonstrating that enough people want that, that person will make the change that you're requesting. But you have a specific request in mind. An open letter is a little bit different in that it may or may not be addressed to someone in power. And even when it is addressed to someone in power, um, it might be that you don't expect them to really realistically ever answer you, but it gains impact through publication and through being now in the world of social media being spread among people. So the more people that read your open letter, you actually have a chance to change hearts and minds, even if you're not necessarily successful in convincing a certain politician to take on a certain action. And so I think it can be a lot more powerful when, I mean, they both have their place. Petitions are great when you have a specific legal remedy in mind, but open letters can be much more effective in actually going into cultural change. And so I want to give you two examples of open letters that address cultural changes. Now, the first one is from the women's liberation movement, right, 1974. And so women have just gained, it's been 10 years since the Civil Rights Act, and the ERA has just passed Congress in 1973. It's a hopeful time, but many women notice that culture is still lacking. And so here is Letter to a Folk Singer. It's a letter to Don McLean, who you all may know as the author of the song American Pie, from Red Stockings member Carol Hanisch. And I'll read you the letter in detail. Dear Don McLean, I want to tell you my reaction to your Hudson River Sloop benefit concert in Poughkeepsie the other night, in the hopes that it will lead you to do some hard thinking about your music, and to some changes that will allow myself and other women with a feminist consciousness to hear you with openness, the way an artist should be heard. By the end of your first song about being a cowboy and working life, I was entranced by the simplicity, the clarity, the boldness, the gentle strength, and power of what I was hearing and seeing. You were answering a yearning in me for that kind of artistry. Then came the words, wanting to do to the banker's daughter what the banker does to us. And the trance disappeared in a flash, and all I could feel was a sickening, sinking feeling. Again, I'd been betrayed as a woman. Somehow you had led me to let down my usual protective defenses against insults by entertainers, especially male entertainers. The betrayal would have been there even with the defenses up, but it wouldn't have hurt so much. It would have made me angry. But I was tired of being on guard. I wanted so much just to hear you. You join the ranks of those who want women to pay for what the banker does because they, and you, don't have the guts to take on the banker himself, the man with the power, even in a song. From there, you move to And I Love You So, and some of your other beautiful love songs, and I tried to forgive you, but it was like finding out your lover has been messing around with another. You may take him back, but things are never quite the same. Trust is gone, and with good reason. Even so, I must admit, I learned from you, but what would it have been like if the trust could have been more been there throughout? Starry, Starry Night gave me an insight into art that I've been searching for. Somehow the recording never spoke to me like your live presence did. It came to me while hearing Fool's Paradise, that people's nostalgic yearnings haven't so much to do with better or easier times, but with times when we are most in touch and sure of and less afraid of our feelings. But then came the encore and the woman-hating, sadistic Yonkers girl, and this time I was stunned and angry. So were some other women, including two young teenage girls in front of me who hissed and booed. Did you hear? Of course, it didn't pass notice that the song was a takeoff of an old folk song theme, and that you sang it tongue-in-cheek, so to speak. But that didn't take away the impact of a woman being beaten up and tortured and killed by a man, supposedly you. There was no humor in it, for women anyway. It was psychological terrorism. I left the concert disturbed, angry, unable to sleep. I felt like somebody had convincingly told me how much he loved me and then slapped me in the face to make sure I didn't take him too seriously? Is it possible that your clear, strong, bold, beautiful music and presence was just an act, a performance? How much of your anti-womanism is ignorance, and how much intention? I've taken the emotional risk of writing this letter because I know I want the artistic power that you have on the side of women, on the side of the people. I want and need to know, which side are you on, Don McLean? Most sincerely, Carol Hanisch. As far as I can tell, he never responded to this letter. But it was published in in Red Stocking's collection of essays called Feminist Revolution, where now we can all read it. And I think that in that way, even if you're not directly able to, petition someone for something, an open letter can be very powerful in that everyone around you starts to think about it differently. Fun side note, well, not fun side note, but interesting and depressing side note on this, Don McLean was arrested for domestic violence in January 2016. So it does appear that she was ultimately right. Now, the second example, and so that's an example of how an open letter can help bring about cultural change when the enemy is culture, a culture of violence against women, songs that promote violence against women. But there's also, I think, times when a system is so institutionalized and so vast that a specific legal change is not going to make a difference. And that's what we've seen with the Equal Pay Act. And so when you're speaking to, I think, so many people in power and to a complicated power system, an open letter can once again be effective. And so I've composed my own open letter. I'm going to read it to you. I also wanted to let you know that the source of the statistics that I'll be citing is right here for you to check out later. An open letter to the Democratic presidential candidates. April 16th, 2016, Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders. My name is Laura Brunner, and I'm proud to be a community college professor. I thank both of you for your recent promises to make community college free to students. I support Senator Sanders' call to make four-year colleges free as well. Despite your differences, you both recognize that higher education is a fundamental human right and a vital component of the American dream. However, you may not realize that 50% of instructors are employed on a contingent rather than full-time basis. While full-time faculty members earn comfortable salaries, contingent faculty members do not earn a living wage. We're paid a flat fee per course with no guarantee of continued employment. We are rarely paid to attend required meetings and trainings. We have no employer-sponsored health insurance, no maternity leave, and no access to collective bargaining. Many of us have second or third jobs, and 1 in 4 of us rely on some form of public assistance. The crisis is especially acute in institutions that serve disadvantaged students, such as community colleges and historically Black colleges and universities. These employment practices are detrimental to students. It is extremely difficult for colleges and universities to retain good teachers. Contingent faculty members often teach too many classes, leaving little time for individual students. Sometimes we are advised to cut down the number or length of assignments in order to accommodate a large number of students in each class. Ultimately, the quality of higher education suffers. This year, working full-time hours, I will earn less than $17,000 with a PhD and 7 years of teaching experience. As a state employee, I've suffered pregnancy discrimination, and I've been denied my right to collective bargaining in 2 states. I would like to be able to teach my students that higher education has value and that hard work has rewards. Right now, I find it difficult to believe myself. Comprehensive higher education reform needs to address these unfair, harmful, cost-cutting labor practices. A country that truly values higher education should not ask its professors to live in poverty. And I know that's new information probably for a lot of us, but to me, I think the open letter is a really effective tool for that, because even if Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton never answer me, which is the most likely scenario, at the very least, you all have heard that, and now you know a little bit more about the complex situation that you find yourselves in, being charged being charged for rising college costs and getting less in return, quite frankly. So I will see you on the discussion boards, and thank you so much.